Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ohio Has Issues on your Wednesday. I'm Stephanie Haney.
I'm Mike Polk Jr., and we are your Ohio politics show. We have been for quite some time now. How long have we been doing this mess?
Since January?
Woo-hoo! We're rolling through November, you guys. We're going to help you get over that finish line, and we have two main topics we're going to be discussing with you today. Of course, Springfield, Ohio, you might have heard of it. It's in the news everywhere now, and we'll also be talking about redistricting and that redistricting language, what it's going to look like on the ballot.
Yes, we will. We've got three guests with us today. We've got Amber Hunt, who is from the Cincinnati Enquirer. She did a great, really thorough piece on the situation in Springfield. And we'll also be talking with Chris Davey, who is a supporter of the redistricting amendment. Redistricting.
There it is.
Is how you say that. Redistricting. If you say it 3 times fast, does that will put us to November 6th and the election will be over?
It actually realigns all the lines into proper cohesive pockets.
Good, I like that.
Do it. Okay. And then also we're going to be talking to Jeremy Pelzer about that very subject from Cleveland.com, of course, friend of the show, about an article he wrote about the redistricting decision by the Ohio Supreme Court.
Okay, so we're going to get into all of that in just a little bit. So we're going to switch up the order for you a little bit today. We're going to give you your update on your senatorial candidates, 2 of the 3. Just so you know, not much mention of Libertarian Don Kissick for you today. He's still not saying much, but love to chat with him.
We know you guys want your Kissick fix, but we're just not. He's being very quiet, you know. He is, and I think that's kind of his strategy right now. Lay low, let them, beat each other up, and then Kissick moves in for the kill.
Okay.
That's what I think's happening.
I think just as good a guess as any. All right.
What are those other Senate candidates up to, though?
To your Senate update, there was a political ad that came out this week from the Senate Leadership Fund. We fact-checked that, so here's that. The political ads are coming at us fast and furiously this election cycle. We got emails from a couple of viewers asking us to verify this one.
Brown backed Biden, voting to let transgender biological men participate in women's sports, and supported allowing puberty blockers and sex change surgeries for minor children.
It was put out by the Senate Leadership Fund, a super PAC created to help Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Let's start with the claim that Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown supported allowing puberty blockers and sex change surgeries for minor children. It cites an interview with WSYX in Columbus as proof of this. Here's what Senator Brown said in that interview.
A child's health care decisions are between them, their parents, their families, their doctors, not politicians. I will never agree with anybody that wants to bring politics into the family situation with health care, period.
Brown's campaign told us his comments cited in the ad were not in support of puberty blockers or gender reassignment surgeries, but instead a call to keep politicians out of decisions that should be made between families and doctors. So we can verify this claim is false. Now let's look at the claim about women's sports. When making the claim, the ad refers to a vote in the U.S. Senate from March of 2021. When we pull up this vote on the U.S. Senate website, we see the amendment that was the subject of the vote had nothing to do with allowing transgender people to participate in women's sports. It was actually only about money. Senator Brown voted against including an amendment in the American Rescue Plan that would have stripped federal funding from Ohio schools if those schools allowed transgender people to participate in women's sports. So we can verify the claim that Brown voted to let transgender biological men participate in women's sports is false. Remember, if you see something you want us to fact check, you can send it our way at verify@wkyc.com. I do want to let you know that the Senate Leadership Fund reached out to me. They were disappointed that they didn't get a chance to comment on the fact check and said that there were some things that I was missing. I asked them what those were. They said they'd rather tell my editors, so I can't tell you what additional information they would have liked me to include there. But when they do send it to me, if they do, I'll share it with you here.
Sounds fair.
All right, so there was an article published in the Jewish Insider this week that talks about senatorial candidate Bernie Moreno and the fact that he had campaigned with 2 people who had made Nazi comments. So this is reporting by Mark Robb.
Okay.
The people who are mentioned in this article that he had campaigned with include Ohio State Representative Sarah Fowler Arthur, was with her at events in late July. Now, this person faced backlash from the Jewish community and the Republican Ohio House Speaker. This was in 2022. There was a suggestion made by her in an interview that the Holocaust should be taught in part, quote, from the perspective of a German soldier, in addition to the perspective of victims.
Fowler later apologized and said that her views were mischaracterized.
All right, another July fundraiser where Mr. Marino also had Richard Ayotte there. That is a former U.S. House candidate, did not actually get elected. This person ran in 2010, but at that time it came out that he was in a Nazi reenactment group and photographed wearing Nazi regalia.
Yeah.
At that time, he was condemned by the Republican Jewish Coalition and then the House Republican whip Eric Cantor from Virginia. Kind of doubled down on it, by the way, so I would recommend taking a look at that Jewish Insider article so you can check out exactly what he said, doubling down on that. We did ask the Marino campaign about this and asked if they had a comment about him appearing with these people, and the campaign did not answer that question, but here is what spokesperson Reagan McCarthy did tell me. Quote, "We are not going to be lectured by Sherrod Brown, who has sided with the far left fringe wing of his party." Now that's part of the quote. McCarthy went on to reference some things about Sherrod Brown using what I would describe as hyperbolic language, so I'm just going to tell you the things that were being referenced in the statement that was sent beyond that portion of the quote that I just shared with you. There were comments that Senator Brown had made about not trusting Hamas or Israel's leader to abide by a ceasefire. Also about the senator donating book royalties to a group that has, in part, promoted an anti-Israel campaign. And then talking about college campus protests by saying, quote, "People have the right to speak out and should," in the same context while condemning anti-Semitism.
It's a lot.
That is a lot.
That is a lot. So that seems, that was a lot that she compared that to.
Yeah, so read the Jewish Insider article. They do a really great job. They include the full quote from McCarthy, by the way, and then went into breaking down those things that I just described to you and more. So I would read the Jewish Insider article.
At one point in the article, part of the rationalization I remember that caught my eye for the gentleman who dresses with the Nazi reenactment people is that they're not technically Nazi reenactment people. They reenact the roles of people who also supported the Nazis during their conquest. So, and I feel like when you are slicing it that thin, I feel like maybe just don't do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, that's me. Probably, there's lots of other ones. You can do medieval reenactments.
You can. LARPing.
People like those.
Live action role playing, they
Star
call
Wars. Just find a different thing to reenact.
Yeah, there's lots of options.
So these crazy mistakes aren't made. That's all I'm saying. What do we got next?
Okay, so our senatorial candidates made some comments today about a vote that came before the United States Senate. Senator Sherrod Brown is there right now. If elected, Bernie Moreno hopes to be there. It's the Right to IVF Act, and I want to give you a quick summary of what the Right to IVF Act would do if it passed, which, spoiler, it did not. It would establish a statutory right for an individual to access, a provider to provide, and an insurer to cover without prohibition, limitation, interference, or impediment assisted reproductive technology and IVF services that are provided in accordance with the American Society of Reproductive Medicine professional guidelines. So access to reproductive technology and IVF. Senator Brown voted for this bill to pass, which it did not, and he provided this statement.
Politicians should not be able to stop Ohioans from having children and growing their families. IVF is a lifeline for many Ohioans that allows them to know the joys of parenthood, often after long, expensive, and heartbreaking struggles. And he went on, this bill is crucial to protecting IVF and other fertility treatments from interference by politicians and would make these treatments more affordable for Ohio families.
Now, I asked Moreno's campaign if he would have voted for or against the Right to IVF Act, and this is the statement that I was provided with. Bernie has made clear that he supports access to IVF. He does not support the far-left gimmicks in this bill.
And that is the argument from the Republican Senate, who voted this down. In fact, we have a quote here from John Thune, who's the Republican whip. He said, Republicans support IVF, full stop, no question about that. This is not an attempt to make law. This is not an attempt to get an outcome or to legislate. This is simply an attempt by Democrats to try and create a political issue where there isn't one. So that's their claim.
All right. Now we turn to our topic of Springfield, Ohio, and your senatorial candidates have made comments about what's going on in Springfield.
What's going on in Springfield? I haven't heard anything about this.
Some stuff going on in Springfield, yeah.
Oh, the thing.
The thing.
Okay, yeah.
The thing about
that is a big deal.
The population in Springfield. So if you are new to the planet Earth, there are Haitian immigrants in Springfield. They came there illegally, and it's increased the population in Springfield considerably. There have been more than 12,000 Haitian immigrants that have arrived there in recent years.
And with that comes the strain on the infrastructure that you would expect with all of these people, but also comes the benefits that you would expect with such an influx of people.
What you might not expect is national attention on the city of Springfield for some claims that these immigrants are eating people's pets. You might not expect that, but that claim has falsely been made and repeated multiple times by both Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who is the vice presidential candidate, and the former President Donald Trump during a debate. So Springfield is in the national spotlight. Senator Sherrod Brown made a comment about this. He posted this on social media. He said, "Springfield reminds me of Mansfield, my hometown. It's a proud city with a rich manufacturing history. This community deserves better than to be used as a political pawn. We must work together to keep everyone safe and address the city's challenges. That's what I'll keep doing." Now, senatorial hopeful Bernie Moreno also had some comments. He appeared on Fox News Channel and had this to say about Springfield.
Yeah, it's shock and awe. You don't put 15,000 people in a small town from the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere and just expect it to go well without the resources or the room. Do you understand that this is a little different here? No one hates Haitians, but they can't absorb this kind of wave like that?
Well, first of all, I'm a legal immigrant from Colombia, South America myself, so I absolutely understand it. I also understand as a legal immigrant that it's infuriating when this country rewards people and gives special treatment to others who broke the law to come here.
And we have an additional quote from Bernie Moreno from the Springfield News-Sun story. Here it is. Quote, "What's happened is that Sherrod Brown and Kamala Harris have waved the magic wand, corrupted our immigration system, and shielded them through temporary protected status and asylum. Two loopholes in our immigration system that were corrupted by corrupt politicians." Now that gives the impression, at least to me, that the people are here illegally. But I don't believe that's the case, is it?
It is not the case, and so I asked Moreno's campaign very pointedly. I said, why does Mr. Moreno keep referring to the Haitian immigrants in Springfield as here illegally when they're not?
And his campaign responded, "As Bernie has said time and time again, temporary protected status was extended by Kamala Harris and Sherrod Brown to allow tens of thousands of migrants to remain in our country when the program is supposed to be just that, temporary."
Now, if we cut to what's happening today in Springfield, Ohio, it's a tough scene. There have been a lot of bomb threats. There are people reporting on this. WSYX reporter Daryl Rowland said on social media that in addition to bomb threats targeted at schools, government buildings, and healthcare facilities, Mayor Rob Rue, city commissioners, and staffers have received multiple death threats.
Yeah, and it probably isn't helping the population down there. If we're all that concerned about the population really in Springfield and having too many people there, maybe just stop making it such inflammatory statements so that we can keep the press out of there. I think that the population probably tripled just by the people from CNN and PBS alone who are there. So what I'm saying is maybe shh and quiet this down, and then it'll get a little more elbow room.
Journalistic tourism, would you call it? I don't know if that's a phrase, but that's what I'm going to call it.
But you talked to somebody who is really into this story and who's been there from the beginning.
Yeah, so Amber Hunt is with the Cincinnati Enquirer. She's actually not been in Springfield, but she co-wrote a story with colleagues who did actually go personally visiting Springfield, Ohio. And there's a very thorough article from them on exactly what's happening in Springfield, what's happened over the past 10 to 14 years in Springfield that got us to this point, and what the mood is really like there now. So let's hear from Amber Hunt. All right, we want to say hello to Amber. Thank you for being with us on Ohio Has Issues.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, this is the story that just seems to keep captivating the national attention here, is what's happening in Springfield. And you and a colleague did very thorough reporting on kind of what's been leading up to all of this attention. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. And Amber, I want to start with the question about when Haitians arrived in Springfield. Is this something that happened in the last 6 months, or has this been going on for a while?
No, this has been going on for a while. Basically, there were a few things that happened at the same time that sort of led to an influx in immigration in Springfield of Haitians in particular because of what was going on in their home country. So in Springfield, this is a town that has a history of manufacturing jobs that was tapering off. I mean, the middle of last century, a lot of manufacturing jobs tapered off in a lot of communities. So in 2016, the Pew Research Center did some research and they released that there had been a huge drop in income in Springfield specifically. And it was kind of touted as an example of what kind of problems, parts of the country were seeing because of this dip in jobs. The city decided to do something about that. So they started recruiting more businesses to start having jobs located in Springfield specifically. At the same time, in Haiti, crime rates were and are still out of hand, but they were getting ridiculous. There's a lot of gang activity. They've got some problems over there that people were fleeing from. They were terrified for their families, for their lives. And so they were crossing over into America legally. And these jobs in Springfield just so happened to not fill with every local person. If it had just been local people filling those jobs, we wouldn't have this situation, but they weren't being filled. Haitian immigrants came over and a couple got jobs there. And then, as it happens with an immigrant community, word of mouth spreads. And so more people were coming in and they were filling these positions.
Okay. Now, so that has happened over the last decade. It sounds like would be.
Yeah, over the last decade, the population has increased, but really it's been since 2020 that this huge influx has happened. We don't have an exact number. The initial letter from the city manager that went out to politicians saying, hey, we've got this influx and we need some help, that quoted about 15,000 to 20,000 immigrants. We're hearing it's probably on the lower end of that. It might be 12,000 to 15,000. It's a huge amount, though, for a relatively small community to begin with.
Okay. So everything we're describing here, though, it's all legal, right? Because there's a lot of conversation on the national stage now that's referring to these Haitian immigrants as illegal immigrants. But that doesn't sound like that's the case.
That is largely not the case. I mean, in any community, you can probably go in and find somebody who's there illegally. But the group that was at the center of this, I mean, these are people who came legally through the proper channels. They're permitted to work. They've got ID cards. They didn't cross over in the middle of the night in some nefarious, scene out of a movie.
Okay. So a letter went out this year from the city manager to politicians, as you mentioned, and apparently current vice presidential candidate and Senator J.D. Vance got a hold of that letter, which kind of started some of this conversation that we're having now.
Right. What I saw was a pretty standard letter that was looking for money and help and resources, because whatever the situation is in Springfield, that population increase is tough to manage. So they are dealing with some very real issues centered around housing and, more kids in schools and hospitals being taxed more. So City Manager Brian Heck wrote a letter to a couple of senators, Ohio senators, and said, we could really use some help with there. And in that, he said, we are dealing with this influx of Haitian immigrants. It's a pretty big one, and we could use some help. So that started drawing some attention to it's almost like if you put in the word immigrant into anything at the moment, it's like a flashpoint right now. So that being cited as part of the issue just kind of snowballed. And then separate from that, you do have mounting frustration in Springfield with some cultural differences, tight quarters. I mean, it's basically like if you're sharing your bedroom with 3 more people than you're used to, tension's gonna heighten. And so that's happening out there as well. And then there's some misinformation. So there were a couple of non-emergency phone calls placed to police that said, we're seeing some, I don't know how they knew they were Haitian, but basically we're seeing some Black men carrying geese away from the park. And so police went out to investigate that and found no evidence of it. That's why you didn't hear it in the news before, because even if it had been circulating as a rumor, nothing had been substantiated. And the Springfield Sun News out there, they've got some very talented, embedded reporters who live in the community. If something nefarious had been going on with pets, they would have surely reported that. They didn't, because there's no substantiation of it.
And then it makes its way into a presidential debate not that long ago, that comment being repeated. And that is something, by the way, that we also fact check here. No evidence of anything happening with anybody's pets or abductions or anything like that. Many city officials have come out and said your pets are safe in Springfield. There's no evidence that these immigrants are eating people's pets. So let's just put that out there right now for the people who may be listening or watching to this, that somehow has not made that information, has not made its way to you. But one of your colleagues actually went to Springfield. Can you tell me a little bit about what your colleagues said they saw or experienced when they went there?
It really is kind of interesting how this all unfolds, because the Monday before the debate, I was asked to check on these rumors. So I'm filing the records requests, I'm making the phone calls, I'm trying to find anything that says, yes, this is true. Found nothing. The records requests are, the most that they've been able to provide are these phone calls to police, which are worth knowing about, but you can make a phone call about anything. There actually has to be proof, for it to go any further than that. So the first day's story was like, no, okay, they say it's not happening. The city manager released a statement saying, no, it's not happening. But because the politicians who are amplifying these claims keep doubling down, the next day, 2 of my colleagues were sent out. So they went to Springfield. Aaron Glenn and Liz Dufour, who are great journalists, went out there, talked to people, talked to Haitian immigrants. And again, there's nothing substantiating this. And it felt like I was just like in the backyard with like a badminton racket, knocking down all the rumors, because every time I see something commented on my story online, it would be another thing saying, yeah, but there's video. Okay, except the video, which shows police interviewing a woman who has apparently killed and possibly eaten a cat, which is awful and newsworthy. It's not in Springfield, it's in Canton. And she's not Haitian. She's a lifelong resident. So then you have to say, okay, but that video isn't actually what you're purporting it to be. It's something else. And then there's a photo of a man carrying a goose. Well, that's not in Springfield either. That's the guy in Columbus. It was shot well before these rumors started. I don't know why he's carrying a goose. I don't know if he killed that goose or if the goose was found dead. We have no reason to believe that he's an immigrant either. But when you have these like little disparate pieces of information being flung like it's really like a fire hose to the audience. They're like, yeah, see, but the media just got it wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. No, we actually have to vet this stuff before we present it as viable. So some of my colleagues went out, they talked to the Haitian immigrants, they got a feel from the community what was going on. If it were happening, we would report that it was happening. We're not coordinated enough to try and censor a story like that. There's that, and also the notion. So Vance later said that it's the media's responsibility to vet these claims, not the politicians who amplify them. Okay, so we vetted them and we found them not to be true. And then the response was, well, you're not taking the constituents seriously enough. Well, except it's not appropriate to amplify false claims, and anyone can say anything. And if we were just running around reporting rumors all the time, we're all already pretty, stretched thin. So I'm not sure exactly what outcome here would have appeased that thinking, that line of thinking.
Mm-hmm. So as we look at what's happened now, the governor, Mike DeWine, has spoken. He said that he is in support of federal resources coming to Springfield, Ohio. Have you seen in your reporting, and maybe too early for this, has there been any federal response? Do we expect to see any kind of federal support coming to Springfield for these infrastructure issues that are related to legal immigration and the growth of a city?
That is a good question. I think the one good thing that has come of this is that conversation is starting, because there are a lot of little towns like Springfield. And it's interesting, really, because a number of these towns, Cincinnati did it, Springfield did it, a number of others in Ohio, they actually had these proclamations welcoming immigrants into their communities in the 2010s. Having that welcoming attitude and having the resources available to deal with a big influx, those are two different things. And so it really does require more resources than I think they were anticipating. They wanted the jobs even, but it's just such a tightrope for a lot of these cities to both have the jobs, have the workers to fill those jobs, and then to have the resources to make it a comfortable community for everyone, new and old residents alike.
One more question before we let you go here, Amber. I do kind of just want to get a sense, your colleagues went out there. We're seeing this sort of picture painted of a ton of hostility. I know that the temperature is a little high right now in Springfield, but were your colleagues out there seeing these groups of people, the native Springfieldians, for maybe lack of a better term, and the Haitian immigrants pitted against each other? Or does everybody seem to be coexisting and, working through troubles and you just having like a relatively nice time?
For the most part, they're coexisting just fine. I mean, and the people who are concerned about the resources being stretched thin, they're not blaming the immigrants. They recognize that any influx of population is going to cause some of these same problems. So I think, there's a lot of negativity and hatefulness being broadcast out into the world that actually isn't necessarily reflected in Springfield.
Amber, we appreciate your perspective so much. Thank you very much for your very thorough reporting on all of the historical elements that have created the situation that now exists in Springfield. Thanks for being with us on Ohio Has Issues.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much to Amber Hunt. Really appreciate her insight. Has obviously been following this very closely for quite some time.
Killed it. Did very well. And you never know it was her first time being on the show. She barely seemed nervous to talk to us.
Barely at all. I wonder why. All right. Well, Governor Mike DeWine and your U.S. Senator for Ohio, J.D. Vance, were on CNN this week. We just heard Bernie Moreno, who hopes to become a senator for the state of Ohio, talking about the Haitians in Springfield and describing them as illegal. Well, here's Governor Mike DeWine, who is also a Republican, saying something different on CNN this week.
My job, I think, is to reflect exactly what's going on in Springfield. So the mayor tells us and the chief of police tells us there's been no evidence at all of anyone eating a dog or any Haitians doing any of that. These Haitians that are there are legal. They work very, very hard. I met this morning with a number of business people who employ these Haitians, and they tell me that they're really essential, to them getting the job done. They work hard. They're family focused. The culture in Haiti respects education a great deal. So those are just things I think we need to point out.
Pretty clear, I thought. But then here is Senator J.D. Vance, also on CNN, saying some things that don't seem to align with the governor's statements.
Just once and for all, you again started this in part by saying that, which Donald Trump repeated on the debate stage, that, and he didn't say anything about the policies that you're talking about. He just said Haitians are eating dogs and cats. Can you affirmatively say now that that is a rumor that has no basis with evidence?
Dana, the evidence is the first-hand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to, create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast. You had one interview with her. You talk about pushing back against me, Dana. You didn't push back against the fact that she cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is why a lot of Americans can't afford food and housing.
You just said that you're
creating
creating a
about
story.
Public policy.
Sir, you just said that you're creating the story.
What's that, Dana?
You just said that this is a story that you created. So the eating dogs and cats thing is not accurate.
Dana, it comes from firsthand accounts from my constituents. I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it. I didn't create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Her policies did that, but yes, we created the actual focus that allowed the American media to talk about this story and the suffering caused by Kamala Harris's policies.
So it's pretty clear there that Dana Bash took that to mean that Senator Vance was admitting to making up the stories about the pet eating that he said was happening, which has been proven to not be happening. There's no evidence of it in Springfield, Ohio. We know that story is made up.
Yeah, and just to further illustrate that, we have, I guess, proof, pretty definitive proof here. Definite proof from the Wall Street Journal of all places. They had an article come out, was that today, I believe?
Within the last day or two. If it wasn't today, it was yesterday.
Confirming that the woman who made the original report did not actually lose her cat. Her cat has been found. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal went and checked the story out, met the woman herself, who is a huge Trump supporter, and we have a picture of her here. This is her being when she was spoken to by the Wall Street Journal at the House. And as you can see, she is a Trump supporter, and she has said sorry, she was mistaken, and she actually has apologized to her neighbors.
And the reason that she's come into this fold is that the Vance campaign provided a police report that was made by this woman to the Wall Street Journal. That was their evidence that this was happening. She said she believed that her neighbors, who were Haitian, had eaten her cat. Turns out the cat turned up in the basement, and she's apologized to those neighbors.
And Miss Sassy is just fine. That's the cat's name.
I like that. I had a cat named Sassy.
But it does bring up an interesting point there. I feel like that woman even found it in her heart to say, I was wrong and I'm sorry, and express that. And we can't seem to be getting that out of some of the people who are still talking or spreading these lies.
I asked Senator J.D. Vance's campaign specifically about this woman whose police report they had provided as proof, now saying that the cat has been found. And here's what they told me.
Senator Vance has received countless messages from residents of Springfield on the disastrous effects Kamala Harris's immigration policies have created for their hometown. A shortage of affordable housing, stressed public resources, declining public safety, and spikes in communicable disease. It's shameful that the media is ignoring these real concerns while purposely twisting Senator Vance's words.
I do want to make a quick comment on that note that was mentioned on spikes in communicable disease. That's also been reported on, and it's actually the opposite of that. There has not been a spike in communicable diseases. It's actually gone down.
Since 2015, it's been going down.
Yeah,
so that's completely wrong too. But so not necessarily a full-throated apology that we got there. In fact, not at all.
Nope.
So, oh well.
Okay, so that puts a button on our conversation about Springfield, Ohio for the moment, but not quite yet on the vice presidential and presidential candidates. Here's your official vice presidential update, since we've talked so much about the vice presidential candidates so far.
Let's get to it.
Your update is that J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are still set to debate on October 1st.
Yeah, it's still happening.
Yeah.
Okay, what else you got for us?
All right, it's time for your Ohio Roundup. And in your Ohio Roundup, we're going to start in Portage County. The Portage County Sheriff has made news.
Yes, he
has been doing some interesting things down there. He has called for people to, quote, write down all of the addresses of the people and, quote, displaying yard signs for Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the Democratic nominee for president. We got a lot of messages about this. People are very concerned about safety, given this particular call for people to write down addresses of people publicly expressing support for the Democratic candidate.
Now, to be clear, the message did imply that the suggestion was that people could drop off illegal immigrants, or immigrants, I should say, at those people's houses. That's what I took from it. In any way, it's not a great tone for a sheriff to be setting. Do you agree on that?
I would certainly say that it's worth conversation, and that's what a lot of people are doing, talking about it. Here's our news story from WKYC in Cleveland this week.
State officials say that they've reviewed Zukowski's comments and found that his comments do not violate any election laws, adding that the sheriff can speak and answer for himself about those remarks. So while we haven't heard from Zukowski in person, he doubled down today in another Facebook post addressing these remarks. Over the weekend, in a Facebook post, he referred to illegal immigrants as locusts and called for people to take down the addresses of Kamala Harris supporters. Today, in another Facebook post, Zukowski said he has a First Amendment right, and that his post may have been, quote, a little misinterpreted, adding that he is a, quote, lawman and not a politician. People on both posts expressed their support for Zukowski's comments, while others were more critical, calling the initial post disgusting and racist. A law professor said he believes the comments could be intimidating to voters.
As a governmental official, it is very difficult to disaggregate his private thoughts and statements from his role as a county sheriff. And therefore, anything he might say, regardless of whether it's in a private forum that becomes public or whether it's a public official statement itself, can be fairly read as his position.
So the sheriff clearly not backing down on this post that was made on social media, kind of citing his ability to speak freely.
Not his first time being controversial. I thought this was an interesting backstory. He was also got a lot of attention in the media and nationwide when the Guardians changed the name of their team from the Indians to the Guardians, and he did not care for it, and he wrote on official sheriff letterhead. He put out a statement. Actually, we have the statement here saying, in response to a recent announcement made by Cleveland's Major League Baseball team, I felt compelled to make a statement on behalf of the silent majority. It goes on about how outraged he is and about how that was all meant, to honor, the normal stuff of when people try and defend the name, the being mad about the name change. And so the very fact that he decided to put that out from the sheriff's department, representing apparently everybody, and I don't know the county, but it's, so the guy obviously is like a real magnet for this sort of thing, and he just likes the attention.
Seems to be so. Now let's travel to Twinsburg for this interesting story out of Twinsburg. This is Cleveland.com, Hannah Drown reporting on this. The Twinsburg mayor is threatening residents that are demanding public records. A lot of drama to this story.
I hadn't even heard about this.
Yeah, so at a Twinsburg City Council meeting, Mayor Sam Scafidi threatened residents. He did. These are the the residents who are calling for transparency and accountability in city government.
Okay.
So a little bit of backstory here. For months, these people have been demanding the release of public records. They've been filing public records requests under the Freedom of Information Act. They believe that these records would show corruption, sexual harassment, and records tampering made by 3 former police officers. There's even a lawsuit about it. I think the lawsuit was filed back in April. Well, on September 10th, there was a council meeting where Mayor Scafidi, he held up a stack of papers, and he implied that the stack of papers had personal information about some of the people who were filing these records requests, and that they might not want those details made public.
Oh, that does sound like a bit of a threat.
The mayor said that releasing records could be, quote, a two-edged sword, and that pushing for openness might be regretful for people whose personal matters were exposed.
So it's sort of like, this is a nice place you got here, be a shame if something happened to it. Like that kind of vibe?
Funny you should put it that way, because here's a direct quote from the mayor. If you're in a glass house, don't throw stones. Some people will be embarrassed and they'll be sorry with their requests, but everything's coming out.
Okay. So?
I have never been more curious about the results of those public records requests.
That is interesting. Did you happen to see what the justification, or even any kind of rationalization they're using for withholding them?
There doesn't seem to be a rationalization for withholding them. This seems to be it. The mayor seems to think, based on these comments, I mean, obviously I can't be in the mayor's mind, but the statements to me suggest or imply that he believes he's doing some kind of greater good at the moment.
Okay.
By not releasing the information.
Now,
says it's going to come out.
We have one more topic to get to. Thank you everyone for being with us here in Ohio Has Issues. We love you, you know that.
We do.
And what we need to tell you about that is really important is that we actually have our ballot language settled on by the Ohio Supreme Court. This, of course, is in regards to the redistricting amendment that will be on the ballot in November. The purpose of which is to try and help end gerrymandering and take it out of the hands of politicians, the redistricting process, and give it to a panel, a non-political panel. So, what do they have to do to get that done?
What do they have to do to get what done?
No, I'll
I
keep
don't
going.
understand.
It's my fault. So what they have to do is they have to get language on the ballot that is approved by a ballot commission.
Oh, right, yeah.
They have to go. So that's what they have to do. So, but who decides first what that language is going to be?
The ballot board.
That would be the ballot board. Ballot board. Who is on what, or who's on the ballot board?
This is a real who's on first, because I don't even know where you're going with these questions. Who's on the ballot board? There's 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. This I know. This is a fun pop quiz.
It's okay. And Frank LaRose wrote the original language. The people who were pushing for this amendment, they didn't care for Frank's language because they thought that it was very biased. They thought that it didn't represent what they were trying to pass. And so that goes to the Supreme Court, who decides whether or not, so they sued, and then that goes to the Supreme Court. That's where the Supreme Court decides whether or not that language is actually appropriate or not. Oh my gosh, it's so tedious. And
it really is.
I know that it's probably more confusing now than when we started, but you know who's going to help us get through it all? Mr. Jeremy Pelzer from Cleveland.com. Take it, Jeremy. Jeremy Pelzer, thank you for joining us yet again, sir.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We've got some fun new ballot language to discuss. We're getting to the bottom of it. And you wrote a great piece called See Why the Ohio GOP-Controlled Ohio Supreme Court Mostly Sided with Republicans on Redistricting Reform Ballot Language. What a sexy headline that is, am I right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine?
2,400 words of solid gold.
I'll bet the millennials were going crazy when they saw that one. So we're going to start right at the top with the ballot summary language. That's actually what the thing is called. Now, there was no official ballot title for this thing. So, but why don't you first start with, tell us what the kind of language change that they wanted, and then the actual, what the Supreme Court said would be allowed.
Sure. So when you go in to your polling place or you mail in your ballot, you're going to see at the top of the summary, the title of the summary, and the title is to create an appointed redistricting commission not elected by or subject to removal by voters of the state. And obviously, you can probably guess Democrats were not thrilled by that, and redistricting advocates wanted to, said that I was unconstitutional, but the court held that that is totally fine because it's not factually inaccurate.
Okay, and there's a lot of that. A lot of totally fine where it might be misleading, but the language is factually accurate, and so the Supreme Court okays a lot of this language. They did object to a couple of things that we'll get to, obviously. But in Section 1, the first part of in Section 1, here's what the proposed amendment says. It says that it would repeal Ohio's current redistricting process for legislative districts, passed by more than 71% of statewide voters in 2015, and congressional districts, passed by nearly 75% of voters in 2018. So now what does the ballot language say? That the proposed ballot amendment would, quote, repeal constitutional protections against gerrymandering approved by nearly 3/4 of Ohio electors participating in the statewide elections of 2015 and 2018, and eliminate the longstanding ability of Ohio citizens to hold their representatives accountable for establishing fair state legislative and congressional districts. Now, was that okay?
That was okay. The court said that is totally fine because it's not inaccurate and it's not forbidden persuasion, to use their term, to say that this proposed amendment would repeal anti-gerrymandering protections. The court noted that in a couple of the rulings that were against Republican redistricting plans in the past by Maureen O'Connor, the former Republican Chief Justice, and Democratic justices, they actually made references to how the current system was put in place to stop gerrymandering. So therefore, the court held now that, it would repeal anti-gerrymandering provisions.
Now, meanwhile, of course, the reason that they're going forward with this ballot initiative is because our last attempt at redistricting reform is on the books, but it didn't work. And that's why they're doing this. But they're ignoring that aspect of it. Is that correct?
Well, Republicans would argue that it has worked, especially since the latest round of redistricting last year was passed unanimously. The maps were passed by both Republican and Democratic members of the Redistricting Commission. But there's a lot of advocates, mostly Democrats, some Republicans like Maureen O'Connor, who think that this system is broken and needs to be changed, and that's why they're trying to change it.
Okay, now that's moving on to Section 2. The Redistricting Commission would have to draw congressional legislative districts that favor either Democrats or Republicans based on the average percentage of the vote each respective party statewide candidates received in recent elections. In other words, I'm quoting you, by the way. If recent Republican statewide candidates got 55% of the vote, on average, 55% of the new congressional legislative districts would have to have more Republicans than Democrats in them. Can you explain that and just break that down a little bit and see what the problem is with it?
Yeah, so stay with me here.
Okay.
The whole framework of this, the underpinning of this whole amendment would be the goal, if this is passed, is not to draw competitive districts where every district would be able to be won by a Republican or a Democrat. The goal would be to draw districts, the percentage of districts that would favor one party or another based on how those parties' statewide candidates did in recent elections. So what that means in English is, let's say over the last 6 elections, Republican statewide candidates like Donald Trump or J.D. Vance won by, say, 55% on average. That would mean this redistricting commission, if passed, would have to draw 55% of congressional districts would have to favor Republicans, 55% of House and Senate districts would have to favor Republicans, and 45% of districts would have to favor Democrats. And so according to the ballot summary language upheld by the Supreme Court, that is gerrymandering because this redistricting commission would have to draw districts that favor one party or another to meet the requirements of the percentage that has to favor one party or another.
And you say here that the court cited dictionary definitions of the word gerrymander. They lean into that pretty heavily. It does very clearly seem as though they are using the term gerrymander intentionally in the ballot language, LaRose, in order to give the impression that this actually does encourage gerrymandering, which technically by a Webster definition it does, because that's favoring any one group in any way. But it's really the implication is that it's more to muddy the waters and confuse voters by using the word gerrymandering in an anti-gerrymandering initiative.
Reasonable minds can have a debate over what is gerrymandering and whether this would be anti-gerrymandering or pro-gerrymandering. The question is whether this should show up in a summary, which under law has to be neutral and not argumentative. And the court held that this, by calling it gerrymandering, not only is it not argumentative, the court basically said this is gerrymandering. And but if it's in the state constitution, as they're trying to do, then it can't be unconstitutional by definition.
Pretty bold. They also have some issues with the language, or they didn't have issues with the frank language actually about what is in Section 3, talking about the makeup of the parties that would make up this commission. And can we talk about what was proposed and then also what was decided by the court?
Sure. Again, the proposal would set up a 15-member board, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 5 independents. And the question here is about whether in the ballot language, in the ballot summary language, it says that it would require that a majority of partisan commission members belong to the state's 2 political parties. And then they kind of get into the question of whether belong to is really a best way to describe it.
Right.
In the actual amendment language, it says affiliated with, and that means things like, did they vote for this party? Did they donate money to this party? And the Supreme Court held that the summary language saying that they would belong to these parties is accurate because, doing things like voting for a party in a primary or giving money does effectively mean you belong to that party, even though the redistricting advocates, reform advocates would argue that there's all these protections in place in the proposal to ensure that party hacks do not control how these districts are made.
More than anything, it feels like they're looking for, it's almost impossible to lay out a perfect person to be a candidate on one of these boards who's got a completely innocuous history or a completely Democrat or completely Republican or completely independent history. And if you want to, you can probably find something in somebody to just be like, hey, that can't be a Republican. I've seen them recycling or something like that. So it's a really impossible situation in some ways to be in unless there is some good faith involved. And I don't see a whole lot of that right now. Do you?
Yeah, the Venn diagram between people who are qualified to weigh in on this and have a background in it is kind of here, and the people who have no political bias or affiliation at all are kind of here, and there's a very little overlap over that.
Right. Because if you care enough to be knowledgeable enough to be involved in this, you've probably been at some point in some way what could be regarded as political at some point in your life. So that's
right,
tricky.
unless you moved to Alaska for 25 years and then just suddenly came back or something.
Boy, that sounds nice, doesn't it, right now?
This time of year.
Okay, section 4. Here's what the ballot language says. This is from, again, our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose. The proposed amendment would, quote, prevent a commission member from being removed except by a vote of their fellow commission members, even for incapacity, willful neglect, or duty or gross misconduct, end quote. So what did the legal challenge say about that?
So basically what's that question here is the way the ballot summary phrased it. There's two ways of looking at it. It's okay, well, you hear the amendment says, here are the reasons you can kick someone off. And the ballot summary language that the Republicans authored says, okay, well, here are the reasons you can't do it. It would prevent you from doing anything except for the stated reasons. And so is that accurate or misleading? And the court held it is not misleading. It is accurate. And even though the Republicans described it, quote, in their own terms, it's totally fine.
Okay. So let's talk about section 5. That's the Ohio Supreme Court would have exclusive original jurisdiction over all legal challenges to redistricting maps, and that, quote, no other challenges to an adopted final redistricting plan, ... may be brought in any court. So explain that one.
Well, this is one of the two things, the two parts of the summary that the court actually said were inaccurate and needed to be corrected. The summary language says it would, as you said, it would prohibit filing in any court. Well, the Supreme Court noted that people can still file federal lawsuits challenging these redistricting maps because the Ohio Constitution, by our whole system of government, can't govern federal law. It's just the federal Constitution. So that's one part of it. Secondly, it also talks about in the summary language that you can only challenge it about this proportionality, whether what I was talking about before about whether, 55% of districts are Republican leaning because 55% of Republican candidates statewide got that vote.
Right.
Well, or you get what I'm saying. But the point is that there's other reasons you can challenge these maps too in the Ohio Supreme Court about based on, like if you, the Redistricting Commission drew the maps based on where elected officials, like incumbents, already live. You can challenge it based on that. You can challenge it for other reasons as well. And so the Supreme Court said, hey, ballot board, you got to make sure that you add these other reasons that people can challenge it. And that's one of the two changes that the ballot board made on Wednesday.
Okay, section 8. This is one that redistricting commissioners, staff, and constituents would be forbidden to communicate with any, quote, any outside person or vice versa about the redistricting process or plans other than during designated public meetings and via official commission portals. So what did the ballot summary language say there?
So the amendment itself said that redistricting commissioners, staff, consultants, they can't communicate with, quote, any outside person or vice versa. People can't communicate with them about the redistricting process or plans other than during designated public meetings or commission portals, which means like this online portal you can submit testimony to and comments. So the ballot summary language said it would limit the right of Ohio citizens to freely express their opinions to members of the commission or staff about redistricting. Well, the legal challenge said this is, baseless because there's all these guarantees in the proposed amendment about public participation. They have to hold several rounds of public hearings and allow public comments and that there's all these safeguards, they say, in place to ensure that these maps aren't negotiated just behind the scenes.
Right.
And so by limiting people's ability to communicate with redistricting members, is to make sure that you don't have party bosses going behind closed doors saying, hey, here's the maps we want.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other part that the Ohio Supreme Court ordered the ballot board to rewrite, because according to the court, the Republican summary does not adequately explain that there are these guarantees,
right.
The meetings and the public comment periods and stuff. So the ballot board had to enter some language basically noting that there are these ways for people to participate.
Right. Ballot language essentially said that, you'll have no participation or say over any of this, when in reality it's built into that. And that's the correction that they need to make, right?
Just that they have these opportunities to actually weigh in, but it's, there's all like the quote unquote official channels that they have to participate.
Okay, just a couple more. Section 9. That is the one that says that the new Redistricting Commission would have until September 19th, 2025 to improve the new congressional and legislative districts. Those districts would be used until after the 2030 U.S. Census, when new 10-year maps would be drawn. So how did Frank LaRose's ballot language describe that?
So the controversy here is that it said it would replace districts, quote, adopted by the citizens of Ohio through their elected representatives. Well, the proponents of this redistricting measure in their lawsuit said, well, hey, the current maps that Ohio has now, they weren't adopted by the citizens of Ohio. They were adopted by this redistricting commission. And so you got to redraw that. That's not accurate. Well, the court said, well, no, I mean, under our system of government, citizens manifest their will through their elected representatives, which include the Ohio Redistricting Commission and state lawmakers. So that's A-okay to have that language in there.
So what they're saying is that you have representation through the incredibly gerrymandered legislature that you voted on to a degree, and so those are your people. They are your voice. That's what they're saying?
They didn't put it quite in those terms.
Okay, Section 10, round of the bend, nailing it. Part of Section 10 says that if passed, the state must provide adequate amounts of money for the new Redistricting Commission, essentially. And then it goes on. And how did Frank LaRose summarize that ballot language?
That the proposed amendment would, quote, impose new taxpayer-funded costs on the state of Ohio to pay for members, staff, professionals, consultants, as well as, quote, an unlimited amount for legal expenses. So clearly the idea is to convey the impression that this is going to be a lot of money. The legal challenge by Issue 1 advocate says, well, hey, this is misleading because already the state covers redistricting expenses and already they pay legal fees without any fixed limit.
In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jeremy, our tax dollars paid to defend illegal maps, probably with our own money, I'd assume, right? The times that they were rejected, we paid for those lawyers, taxpayers paid for the lawyers to defend what were considered to be illegal maps under which we are still actually living.
More than $1 million, according to the lawsuit.
So it's something new.
Yeah.
Okay, but they didn't allow that. The court said no.
The court said it's actually accurate that it sure would create new costs, including things like there's $125 a day per diem for each redistricting commissioner. That's not what's in current law. They would have to hire an executive director. So, and then they said it's true, like that there are no limits on what the state would have to pay for legal expenses. So it's fair and not misleading to put that in there. So that amendment that summary language is totally fine.
The Secretary of State reacted favorably to this decision. Was there anything surprising? And I'll just read you the quote from him. This decision is a huge win for Ohio voters who deserve an honest explanation of what they've been asked to decide. The court's opinion reinforces that this proposed amendment does in fact require the gerrymandering of Ohio's legislative and congressional districts. And that's something the dark money foreign billionaire behind this bad idea has consistently tried to deny. So he's happy. Overall happy. Was he mad at all that two of those things had to be fixed? And does he consider this a big win? Really?
Well, he after the ballot board meeting, reporters tried to ask him questions. He didn't make eye contact and left without answering any questions, so we don't directly know. But during the meeting, LaRose said that he thanked the court for ruling so quickly. And he said, okay, we're going to make these changes, and we're good. We're all done. Mission accomplished.
Okay. Now we got to get the reaction from the other side. We have you included reaction from the Democrats who did not agree with this decision. Justice Michael Donnelly agreed to the decision that ordered changes to the ballot language, but vehemently disagreed with those, quote, that those corrections are even remotely adequate to prevent the ballot language as a whole from being misleading, end quote. That seemed to be kind of the general vibe from the Democrats on the bench. Is that right?
In fact, that was actually one of the kinder statements made by Democrats. If you look at Jennifer Brunner, who also another Democratic justice who authored a dissent, she spoke in even stronger language, saying that this is, just I forget the exact terminology, but that is a really, really bad opinion.
Please allow me. We should be requiring a nearly complete redrafting of what is perhaps the most stunningly stilted ballot language that Ohio voters have ever seen. That's Supreme Court Justice Jennifer Brunner. And she went on to say that the ballot board language, quote, is tantamount to performing a virtual chewing of food before the voters can taste it for themselves to decide whether they like it or not. So safe to say, end quote, safe to say, not a fan. They have no recourse, though, and this is the language that's going to go through, right?
This is the language, and voting starts on Friday for overseas and military voters in Ohio. So it looks like, unless something very unexpected happens, that this is what voters are going to see when they get their ballot.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. Appreciate all your hard work. I hope you keep us informed as we round the bend to November. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeremy Pelzer, for doing the work to walk us through all of that, because it is very tedious.
It is. Thank gosh we have Pels Bells, that's my nickname for him, to help walk us through. Thanks, Jeremy.
Pels Bells, we appreciate you. It's beautifully ringing in my ears. All right, so in your conversation with him, you heard what Secretary of State Frank LaRose feels about this ruling by the Ohio Supreme Court. Happy about it. So we wanted to get the perspective of Citizens Not Politicians organizer Chris Davey and how their group is feeling about this ruling from the Supreme Court. Chris Davey, thank you for being back with us again here on Ohio Has Issues.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm glad to be here.
So this is the moment a lot of us have been waiting for, trying to understand what the Ohio Supreme Court was going to do about this challenged language that will appear in ballots related to the redistricting amendment. How does Citizens Not Politicians as an organization feel about the result from the Ohio Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, we're not happy. The court left in place a lot of language that we had objected to that's clearly inaccurate and biased. They did, however, order the ballot board to go back and redraft some of the language that they did find was biased and inaccurate. So that's good. But ultimately, they left a lot of bad language in place, and the ballot board is going to finalize the language tomorrow. And it's not really going to matter at the end of the day, because Ohioans are smart. They're going to see through the lies, and they know that gerrymandering is bad, and they know that issue one is going to end gerrymandering in Ohio by getting citizens in charge and getting politicians out of the process, which is something that's worked in a number of other states.
Just so that we can clearly parse it for the people who are listening to this and watching this, some of the language that will remain in the ballot summary language does describe the redistricting amendment from Citizens Not Politicians as something that would require gerrymandering. What would you say to that?
It's like going down the rabbit hole. It's like taking something and turning it completely around. How the court was able to conclude that is baffling. One thing to keep in mind is that this is the same four-justice majority that recently ruled that Ohioans should expect for there to be bones in their boneless chicken wings. And one of the justices in the minority pointed this out. But it's a poorly reasoned decision. No reasonable person could look at an amendment that clearly states it would ban gerrymandering and then conclude that it requires gerrymandering. It's just not true. So what Ohioans need to do is get informed, read the amendment themselves. They can visit citizensnotpoliticians.org, and they'll see through this. The irony is that some of the same politicians on the ballot board that wrote this language, Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State, being one of them, are among the same politicians that wrote 7 gerrymandered maps that the Supreme Court found were unconstitutional 7 times. They're some of the same politicians who have made Ohio among the 10 most gerrymandered states in the country. And what Ohioans will see is that this is just further evidence why we need to have lying, cheating politicians like Frank LaRose out of the map drawing room. He can't help himself. This is a guy who texted. There were texts that emerged during one of the recent previous map drawing processes where he privately told one of his staffers that these maps were ridiculous. And then publicly he went out and supported them. This is the guy who was featured in ads last fall in the constitutional amendment on reproductive rights, where he was publicly saying one thing and privately saying another. So he can't be trusted. He was proud that he wrote this language. Last night, he spiked the football and did a touchdown dance saying this is a great decision, a decision where the Supreme Court admonished him and his fellow politicians for writing language that was biased and inaccurate and misleading. So these are the folks we're talking about. These are the career politicians who just want to remain in power for life by drawing these fake gerrymandered maps. And Ohioans are going to see right through it. They're going to vote yes on issue 1 to end gerrymandering in Ohio.
Not to get off topic here, but it is a bit related. You mentioned that the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, was admonished in the court ruling for this language that was not descriptive of the redistricting amendment. The same thing happened with the reproductive rights amendment. He did have to go back. The ballot board had to go back and rewrite portions of that when there was, some discrepancy over whether that language was appropriate as well. So what does Citizens Not Politicians have to say about that, which this is now the second instance in which the Secretary of State has to be involved in rewriting ballot language that was found to be inappropriate?
Yeah, Frank LaRose has demonstrated himself to not be interested in objectively applying the standards and fulfilling his duty under the Constitution. And, what Ohioans want is a fair arbiter. We just launched an ad today that compares the gerrymandering politicians like Frank LaRose to the cheating football coach, Jim Harbaugh, who is up at Michigan, right? And, when Frank LaRose puts his thumb on the scales, it's like the ref, fixing the game. People understand fairness, and Ohioans in particular are really big on fair competition, and we don't go in for cheating. So what the court found in part of its decision is that Frank LaRose and the other politicians on the ballot board that wrote this language were not being truthful with the people of Ohio. In the instance you were referencing last year, he was admonished last year by the Supreme Court for not being truthful with the people of Ohio. And people see through that. It's going to backfire. People are going to vote yes on issue 1 in November.
One more question for you before we let you go, Chris. There are 2 former Ohio Supreme Court justices backing this redistricting amendment, both a Republican and a Democrat. We look at the court coming down with this ruling. The court, in its 4-3 split, Republican, 4 Republican, 3 Democrats, and the Supreme Court is really on the ballot this fall as well. Do you think that this will have any kind of result in the way Ohio voters vote in regards to that, seeing this ruling come down from the Ohio Supreme Court?
Well, I've worked at the Supreme Court for 11 years under 3 different Chief Justices and watched Supreme Court races very closely for many years. I'd love to comment on these races, but right now I'm focused on supporting issue 1. And, Ohioans are going to inform themselves. They're going to go to the polls and they're going to decide who they want to serve on the court. But as you pointed out, there are 3 seats up this year, and that's unusual. It happens from time to time, but usually it's 2 seats up every 2 years. This year, there are 3 seats out of 7 on the Supreme Court that are up. And Ohioans should take a very close look at who's running and where they stand on the issues and how they decide cases. Only one of the members of the court's majority is in this decision is up for re-election. That's Joe Deters. And he's actually running against a fellow incumbent justice, Melody Stewart, who was in the minority in the case. And so one thing Ohioans could do is go look and read those opinions. Read the opinion that Justice Deters signed on to uphold some of this bad language, and read the dissent that Melody Stewart is a part of. And I think that that'll shed some light for them on how these justices decide cases, and then maybe that will inform their decision when they go to the polls for these really important races in the Supreme Court.
Okay. Chris, thank you very much for talking with us. We always appreciate your time and your perspective here on Ohio Has Issues.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
So there you have it. Citizens, not politicians, clearly not happy about this language, but hoping that the viewers do the work and read the actual amendment, which is going to be published in your newspaper. So maybe pick one up 3 weeks before the election, which it's going to be here before you know it. November 5th is coming fast.
You're right. They do seem none too pleased about this, though. And but really, I was thinking about it. Do you really? How many people are reading through that newspaper thing and just with like a? I mean, I feel like you have to be really engaged to begin with to get a newspaper and read through the entirety of an amendment.
It's a lot.
It does make a difference, and we heard Jeremy talk about that earlier. It does make a difference to people, that language, but how much of one, and will people be able to see through the language in spite of it not being perfect? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, there was a similar situation, as I talked about with Chris, with the abortion last November, the abortion amendment last November, where there was some controversy over the language, and that passed.
That didn't trick you, Ohio. That didn't trick you.
Yeah, so Citizens Not Politicians is hoping that despite the language that they've been adamantly calling deceptive, misleading, ineffective, argumentative, that people
and
will
a lot of
still...
curse words we couldn't use in the interview.
That was after the recording stopped.
Thank you guys for watching Ohio Has Issues.
We'll see you next week.